Pride of Reading Award for their efforts, and I'm very pleased to say they've joined me in the studio right now, and welcome to both of you.
Hello.
And of course the main thing is you're here because of Richard.
Yeah.
So go on, tell me about Richard. I mean, for instance, did he always want to be a soldier?
No, he didn't really. It came a little bit out of the blue when he was about 14, 15, and what it was, he used to do boxing, and he played football as well, and the guy at the boxing club said, if you like sport, mate, you want to join the army, and that's where it came from. And I was really surprised about it. But, you know, then he went on a few things. They used to do these courses that you could go on to kind of get you into the army, and then he loved it. My son's gone
on loads of those. They love it though, don't they?
They love it, adventure training and all that stuff, and then he joined at 16. As soon as he could.
My goodness. And he did pretty well in the army too, because he rose through the ranks, didn't he?
Yep, he did. He became a lance corporal fairly swiftly, and then became a corporal. I mean, I've got to say, he did have a few little blips along the way.
Well, he was only 16. You're a teenager.
No, I mean, by the time he got to... he was a corporal by the time he was 21, 22, and he probably should have got there quicker, but, you know, he wasn't an angel, shall we say.
No. Right. Well, that's all right. Is his dad an angel?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course I am.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, we'll hear more about that, maybe. Yeah. He, because of course he was in the army at this time, he went out to Afghanistan. In fact, he did 3 tours in Afghanistan.
He did 3 tours. He did the first in 05, which was a fairly safe one in the north. And then less than a year later, he did a second one, which was what they called the Siege of Sangin. So he was actually in Sangin when they couldn't go out of the camp.
Yeah,
so they were attacked every day. It was called the Afghan Alamo. We actually didn't know.
You knew nothing of it?
No, not really.
Not
no.
until after.
No, and his company he was out there with were quite lucky they didn't have any casualties. So we really didn't have a clue at that point, as no one else did either, I don't think, about Afghanistan. But the last tour, the 09-10 tour, was fairly obvious fairly quickly that was going to be pretty horrific.
When he came home in between tours, did he tell you, was he one of those sort of people who comes home and then does tell you everything he's been doing and tell you all the stories?
He used to talk to Chris a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I never used to hear a lot, and I'm sure his mum never used to hear a lot either, because I think, you know, it would worry her to death and worry us. But he used to talk to Chris and Daniel,
his brother,
an awful lot about, you know, what he faced and how he felt.
He was at home 2 weeks before he was killed, so he was to have 2 weeks R&R in the 6 months, and he, as luck would have it, he was home 2 weeks before, and I went to Bryce Norton to pick him up. He'd seen three, he was in recce platoon, and out of the 23, 4 were killed, including him. So he'd seen the 3 killed, and I thought, I don't really know how to deal with this. What am I going to do? Shall I ask him? I met him at the airport. At Bryce, and as we were driving, he started straight away. I couldn't stop him talking. He told me about the whole lot. And it, you know, soldiers are weird. They don't. It's not all doom and gloom. It's like they're laughing about the oddest things that other people wouldn't laugh about. You know. And I was supposed to ring Claire to say I'd got him, and we didn't ring her for about half an hour because he just wouldn't stop talking. And we talked about the chances of him dying. You know, before he went back, he knew he could die, so
well, he must have known that because he'd seen mates die.
Yeah, I mean, he just used to say that it was wrong time, wrong place, and you know that's the view that I took when he was killed. I never thought, you know, why my son? You really got to think, why not my son? That's the thing. So, you know, I took a lot of strength from that when he actually was killed. That I knew what he felt about it. Don't get me wrong, he did not want to die in Afghanistan. And he said, I don't want to die in Afghanistan, but he knew that he could.
Yes, it was a dangerous business. Did he love what he did, though?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, he his friend came over on Remembrance Day, who was with him, and he was telling me a story about they were guarding this road in this little compound, and there was 8 of them, and about 200 Taliban, he probably exaggerated, I've got to say, but about 200 Taliban attacked them. And this firefight went on for about 2-3 hours, and they really thought they were going to be overrun and killed. And there was a lull in the shooting, and all his mate could hear was Richard's manic laugh because he loved it so much. And he said, you know, the adrenaline does go, but he said he absolutely loved it. And we've met loads of blokes from there who were with him and everything. They all say exactly the same.
And they're pumping adrenaline, aren't they?
Yeah, but he was made to be in the army. Absolutely,
yeah, and they're
definitely.
very proud of the fact they're trained for that purpose. Aren't they? Very proud of their training.
They are there to fight. They would any infantryman would tell you that's what they do. They're there to fight. So,
I mean, Claire, as you pointed out, you're his stepmum, but you're still witness to all this. You still love him, for heaven's sake.
Absolutely.
How did it make you feel?
Well, I was really worried about him and the impact it would have on him when he returned, because the last night before he went back off his R&R, I sat up with him quite late. We were watching Rod Gilbert. He did a comedy show, and it was on the iPlayer, actually, and we watched it together. And he was saying, I've been there, I've done that. But he was different. He was different when he was home on leave. He was very... he didn't go out partying like he used to.
No.
He used to be big party animal. Our house on a Friday night was always really... Bedlam, yeah. It was full of loud music, loud young men, and smelt of aftershave quite strongly.
Sounds lovely. Very familiar to me, that is.
And it's you know, and I just knew that he was not going to cope with it very well. And I know it's great that he's always been a big talker and he could always talk to everybody.
That is good, because he must have been offloading.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. But I knew, you know, it concerned me. I'm a bit of a worry, but it did concern me how he'd be when he returned home this time round. And that, you know, is part of the reason why we're driven to do the things we do to help the soldiers who have come home, because it's not just about the visible injuries they bring back, it's the mental torment. And we've met a few, and their stories just move us.
We've met Richard's best mate, Nigel Covey. He was he was with him out there, and I mean, they all have counselling, and out of 23 in recce, 4 were killed. The other 8, another 8 had serious injuries, so that's feet blown off and stuff. And there was only the rest to come back, 11 or whatever, to come back out of 23 blokes who went out there, you know. And you think, and Nigel was one of them, but you know, they're really shot away, these blokes. You know.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk more about the work that Team Green was set up to do in a couple of moments. Let's get a bit of music right now. And you, when you heard about his mates being killed, it must have given you this awful feeling that somehow, you know, death was getting closer. It could be him next time.
Yeah, I think so. But you also think, well, you know, in recce, his platoon, 3 were killed before him, and you kind of think, well, 3 out of 23, his chances are better of living. You don't think for 1 minute that it's going to be your son. I mean, I've got to say that when your kids are out in somewhere like Afghanistan, it's every day is absolutely awful, and I mean, it doesn't compare to him being killed, but it's pretty grim. It is pretty grim. And
do you want to hear from him every day, just to sort of, he's got through another day? Okay,
Yeah.
That must be terrible.
Well,
actually.
yeah, Claire does. I actually don't. I don't want to hear from him at all, really, until he comes back.
home.
Yeah, because you don't really know what to say. They're not allowed to say stuff, you see.
No, I suppose they're not.
Because of security and that. And we used to have little codes so that he would be able to say things, but you know, it's a weird, stilted conversation when they ring a bit.
When Rifleman Cyrus Thatcher was killed, he actually went to the funeral, didn't he, Richard?
Well, he went and stood outside with some of his friends to pay his respects. I was in the crowd as well, and I think it was important that he did that, because, you know, he felt very strongly about it.
Yeah.
As you may have seen on the television afterwards, he was interviewed and he was quite angry that he felt people weren't showing their support for Cyrus, but I've spoken to Helena, and I know that she feels that they got amazing support from the people in Reading. But it was after that, when the number of fatalities kept creeping up.
Yeah.
There was more in the public domain, and then by the time Richard died, well, we were just absolutely overwhelmed by the support of people of Reading and Tilehurst and Spencer's Wood. They just... You know, that really helped everybody, didn't it?
When his coffin left our road, we live in a cul-de-sac in Spencer's Wood, and the guy from the funeral directors was going to walk just down the end of our road in front of the hearse, but he had to walk like a mile because there was people lined up all along the road, and he kept walking basically till there was no more people.
And actually, on the way into town, there was pockets of people, because we both worked at the council at that time, and outside the depot down in Majeski Stadium, there was pockets of people waiting to pay their respects.
And when we went up towards the church, you could just see a sea of people Yeah, I couldn't believe it, because you always think, well, no one's going to bother with
Well,
us.
he touched a lot of lives, because maybe he had talked about it with people. And I know your daughter Charlotte, he nearly went along to the school, but certainly he was already a hero in Charlotte's school, wasn't he?
Yeah, and ever since she was little, she's always talked about, her family. Kids draw pictures of family units and stuff, and she'd always mentioned about Richard being in the army, because he did guard duty, ceremonial duties, and he did some at Buckingham Palace, so she took the photos in at a show and tell when she was little. So there's a few boys that have been in her class all the way through, and they kind of had this hero worship going on. So she was very keen to go in. We've never hidden anything from her about the dangers of his job. She was very, very keen to go in and just explain that, because it's not all about going out and shooting people. And she did a PowerPoint presentation. I was very proud of her. She did a PowerPoint presentation all by herself, showing what the role was out in Afghanistan of a British soldier, and that it's about peacekeeping, it's about hearts and minds, not going in heavy and
not killing people.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Well, he must have talked about that to her.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I mean, soldiering is not. It's not all about the contacts and all about the killing and stuff. No soldier will ever tell you, "Oh yeah, I killed so many people." Because for a start, I don't really know.
Everything you hear, they're very proud of the friends they make with the Afghanistan people.
And the British in particular, it was about hearts and minds and winning the people over, So
and that worked, didn't it? When they were out there,
Yeah, it did. And I mean, it's not about the politics. I mean, the soldiers don't care about politics.
But it's about doing their job, and like you say, they take a pride in it. We're nearly running out of time. We're going to have another song now, and then in a couple of moments we'll talk about Team Green. I also want to talk about actually, the effect that Richard's death must have had on, well, obviously on Charlotte, but on the wider community of children who'd actually come to hero worship him to a certain extent. We'll talk more about that in a couple of moments. And he, like many soldiers, he did write to you about the possibility that he might be killed. And he actually he went to quite a bit of detail about how he would want you to react, didn't he?
He did, yeah. They do a thing, or they're asked to do a thing which they call the death letter, and it's their last letter. You only get it on their death. And it was about 3-4 pages long, and he said, what his feelings about us, basically. And I mean, I've got to say, it was really hard to read it first time, and I don't read it that often. But one important thing he said, for me anyway, was he said he didn't want us drowning in his death. And so whenever we felt down or anything, I just think of that, really. And with the relationship we had, I often think, well, what would he be saying? And I often can hear his voice in my head, and so he was a positive bloke, although actually sometimes he wasn't sometimes, but generally he was positive.
Listen, he was human.
Yeah, he was a moaner, but he was quite. So we've tried to be as positive as we can be, about it. And he did die doing something that he loved, and me and him and his brother actually were very much into this sort of. When it's like rock stars when they die young, isn't it? They're forever young. And we did talk about that sort of thing, and he always called himself a legend anyway. And now I used to say to him, well, what does that make me? And he said, it makes you father of a legend, doesn't it, mate? So
Oh, that's rather nice.
Yeah, so
he'd given you a role. Yeah, you knew what role then to walk into.
Yeah, well, I was hoping he was going to say I was a legend, wasn't I, obviously? But, that wouldn't even enter his head.
Hey, listen, it's not to be a father of a legend. How on earth did Charlotte take it, though? And her school, where he'd become a bit of a hero, it must have affected them all so badly.
It did. The one thing that we've done from Richard's death is we've become quite good friends with Carla Fox. She's... fellow Team Green coordinator. She was a teacher or teaching assistant in Charlotte's class, and when Richard died that day, obviously we notified the school. I can't even remember how we did that, but we did notify the school, and the next day obviously we told Charlotte, and then the next day it was kind of like, how do you feel about going to school? And she said, I want to go in. She just wanted it to be normal. She needed a bit of normal, so she went into school. And she went in a little bit after the teachers had told all the children, and apparently it was absolutely heartbreaking. You had the deputy head crying, you had the teachers crying, the children were all crying. It was awful. And they gave them some really practical things to do, and they all wrote letters to the front line, to the guys who are out there begging them to stay safe. And they did things like that just to help get rid of some of their grief. And some of them came to the funeral, and a good friend...
Did.
a good friend of Charlotte's wrote a speech a poem that Charlotte read out at Richard's funeral. That was a young man called Jack Arnold.
Yeah.
And he particularly idolised Richard right from a very young age. So
I think you must be very proud that Richard touched so many lives. But tell me about Team Green. Again, he wrote home. He did talk to you about certain things. So you've got a very strong feeling of what he would have wanted you to do.
I think for Team Green was purely selfish from our point of view. We needed something to focus our attention on, and Carla Fox, the teacher at Charlotte's School, met with us and said she wanted to do something to make a difference. And at Richard's funeral, she saw one of Richard's really good friends, Stefan van Neerkerk, who lost both his legs and damaged his arm, and he was in a wheelchair at the funeral. And she said, I want people to know that there's soldiers out there who come back with these horrific injuries. So she persuaded me to jump out of an aeroplane, which was very mad.
A month later, wasn't it?
We did that, and we raised £7,000 very quickly, and we just thought there is the potential to raise lots of money.
And Claire genuinely does not like flying.
I don't like flying or heights.
She genuinely does not.
I don't know how you did.
But I did it, and it was an amazing experience. However, what we've done is it's not just us, but it's so many people, even Richard's mother's side of the family, Eileen's family. A lot of them have been fundraising. Her partner Steve ran in Team Green. We had a team of runners, including your very own Charlotte Foster, and we all ran the Reading Half Marathon, and we raised nearly £10,000.
And what do you do with the money?
Most of the money we've raised has gone to a charity called Care for Casualties, which is a rifles-based charity, because Richard was in the Rifles. And that goes to helping soldiers and their families come to terms with.
It was formed on the day of his funeral, so we kind of thought...
It was launched on the day
of his funeral.
Yeah. So, but we've had people raise money for Help for Heroes in Richard's memory. People have climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Yeah. It's just been amazing. 5
marathons in 5 days. Land's End to John O'Groats.
Yeah, and people that didn't even know Richard. You know, we had a lady who ran the Woodley 10K. She didn't know Richard.
She sparked it off, didn't she?
She raised £360 or something, and she didn't even know him. But he was a friend of a friend. So, you know, and it's still going on now. You know, Richard's cousin's husband had a collection where he works and got £350. So it's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing that even in death he can still reach out and touch people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's what I said. It must make you very proud. And you've been wearing your green jacket, which I noticed the minute you walked in. You said you were wearing it at the Albert Hall the other day. What was that?
Well, we went with Richard's mother, Eileen, and her partner, Steve, to the Royal Albert Hall to the Festival of Remembrance. Very moving. Eileen and I were crying at the start when the Army Wives were there, you know, the choir. Which was amazing, and we saw Sir Cliff Richard,
of course,
various other stars of screen and stage, and it was a very moving experience. We met some friends that we made who lost their son 3 days after Richard, and while it's lovely to meet up with people and keep in touch with them, it does rip. It's like ripping a plaster off, you know. It just brings it all back to the fore.
Of course it does.
That was a very emotional weekend, wasn't it? We had 3 days of it.
We had the 11th on the Friday, we had that on the Saturday, and then we had Remembrance Sunday. So it was. We were thinking of it as like a triple header, weren't we? And we were ticking them off really, because it's almost like you can't get on with your real life because you've got that there. And we're quite, you know, I make out I'm quite blasé about it, but actually it affects you afterwards. That's when it seems to get you, really.
Because it's not just about us and our grief, it's about, and I know Eileen's experienced, it's about other people's grief, and you're trying to help them and support them, and the soldiers go and visit Eileen, they visit Chris, and you feel like you want to help them through their grief. Yeah. When we were at the Pride of Reading Awards, we bumped into... I can't remember. It was a warrant officer.
The warrant officer, Jason Longmate, and he 7 Rifles from Reading got an award after us, and we didn't know they were. Well, we didn't know we were going to get it, an honorary one, and really oddly, Jason had just come down, been posted down here as a sergeant major, and he was with Richard in Sangin, and so he was there. And when they won theirs, you had to come down and. They were all crying and kind of like hugging me and that, and it's like
it's very moving.
And you just don't know what to do with it. You're not expecting
many emotions,
it. You're not expecting it.
Almost too much.
Yeah.
But at least what you are doing is giving Richard a very real legacy. And while it can never be a comfort for his death, it is at least something tangible that you can do for other people
I think
in his
all
name.
the family needs something to hold on to, you know, and day
I've
by
got
day.
to say, Anne, that if Richard could see, he would absolutely love everything that's going on in his name.
Yeah.
He would absolutely love all that. If he, you know, if he can or if he could see it, he would love it. And we've often said, you know, when we're all dead and gone, he will definitely be remembered. And he is a part, like Cyrus, a part of Reading history, and that will remain forever when we're well forgotten. So, and he would love that. Absolutely love that. So,
Well, that's great. At least we can end with a smile thinking of that.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming and telling us about him. He sounds a lovely young man. And thank you for everything that Team Green is doing. I hope you come in again to tell us more about
Well,
what
we
they're
will
up
be
to.
doing more.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much indeed.